Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you from a gilded elvish sheath wielded by a true warrior. I'm your host, Conor O'Brien, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Martin O'Dwyer.
Hey Conor, it's crack. A gilded sheath wielded by a warrior?
Correct.
Not a gilded sword?
The sheath is also gilded.
But you don't wield the sheath.
No, but it's coming to you from... We're coming to you from the sheath.
Oh,
we're being
we're the
drawn
sword.
from the
We're
sheath.
the sword. Okay.
We're the sword, and then we're being wielded by the true warrior.
I get your point. Haha.
All right, thank you for coming to our podcast, guys. I'm going to call it there.
That's it for the day.
So the sheath is also
Yeah.
gilded.
Okay.
The sheath can be gilded, Martin.
Yeah. Of course it can. Yeah.
Plenty of things can be gilded.
Yeah. Anything can be gilded if you're desperate enough.
There you go. So yeah, how are you?
Gilded.
You're gilded. Fuck off.
There goes. Oh no, we're good. We're fine. Maybe. No, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's been a good week. I'm coming to some time off now as well, so I'm planning on getting like a lot of D&D stuff done. I'm gonna do a lot of map making. I think I recently just did like an individual map for the country that my guys are in. So that they can have a better idea rather than just the big world map I have. So that's one down. I have 9 more to go.
Oh man, you guys are kind of like moving at a pace through my world where like I am not completing the maps. I'm starting a map because I'm like I made a map of town Pontier that you were in for all of a session and a half, and I put a lot of time into that, and then you guys are like, you moved on, and I was like, right, well, it was good for my own visualization at least.
Yeah, but like we're gonna have to come back as well, so we'll probably stop in there too.
Oh yeah.
Do you know?
I like I said, I was kind of making a joke there, but I actually do like it for my own visualization.
Oh, sorry. Also, we are absolutely coming back to Pontier because you let slip there was a goddamn dragon there, and we haven't fought a dragon yet. So
yeah.
You know that's gonna happen. Yeah. That's gonna happen eventually.
I was foreshadowing Martin.
Oh yeah, and we're foreshadowing that we're gonna come back and like kill that thing.
It was all like, oh yeah, there's a dragon up there. We don't mess with the dragon, and you guys are like,
dragon.
A dragon, you say?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you say?
He just kept being like, you will die, and we were like, a dragon, you say?
It's a terrible beast of immense power. Yeah, and it's at this mountain.
Yeah, this specifically this one right there.
That one right there.
That we can travel to
cool.
in a few days.
And he's like, don't go near the mountain. He's like, we won't go near the mountain. Shifty eyes.
We'll go near the dragon though, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if we make enough noise outside the mountain and the dragon comes out, we can't be held responsible for that.
Yeah. Oh no! As soon as he said there was a dragon there, like a little fashion like catwalk appeared in my head of just like Lug walking around in new dragon armor.
It's yeah. I was kind of just I've been kind of name dropping things as you've been traveling through the country for the last few sessions, just kind of building up the world and giving you. I'm doing the Kessel Run bit where I don't tell you what things are necessarily. But I'll go, yes, you pass this forest and this river and this is a mountain to the south and here's another landmark. And I'm kind of just building up the world. And if you wanted to history check or whatever that, I would potentially tell you something about that landmark or that town or whatever. And that would inform the world a little bit more. That's all I was doing. And then you guys are like, oh, we're definitely going to kill a dragon. So...
You can't, like, come on. You can't mention a dragon in a game of D&D and not expect everyone to be like, ooh. Like,
in the country you guys are in, I know of 3 dragons that currently exist.
Oh boy.
and none of them are to be fucked with.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's the allure. It's like, you know, it's like that thing when you're on, you know, when you go like visit like a cliff or like walking along like the cliffs of the beach and you like stand at the edge and look at the ocean and you're like, oh, this is beautiful. Then a voice in your head is like, fucking jump.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's like when you're like, there's a dragon and you're like, oh wow, Jesus, probably shouldn't mess with that dragon. And then there's a voice in your head
but maybe
you could though. You could. There's 4E, there's only one dragon.
You've got a backlog of characters, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Oh god. Oh, like Jesus. Oh, I like if I died, I'd be like, okay, I would definitely be upset, but I'd also be, I'd eventually just be like, okay, cool, I guess I'll play X character or Y character, and like, I have a bunch of character concepts in my head that I could like pull and be like, yeah, that'd be interesting or fun, or at least very least like fun to play, and also it'd be kind of, it's almost like if you had to come in with a new character, it's almost like being given like the keys to the sweet shop, because you just come in, you're like, oh, I'm level 11. Look at all these new toys.
It kind of is, yeah. And then like you don't have to wait to naturally progress and be like, oh, I get this and I get that. You just straight away, you're like, boom, level 8 abilities.
Yeah. So like there's that thing, but yeah, if I did die, I think I'd come up with some cool stuff, but I'd be like, oh god, well, there's that was a nice like custom dice box I had made for that character for.
Yeah. Hey, Martin, it's funny, if you were to lose Lug as a character,
yes,
coming in at level 10, which is what you'd approximately be doing at this point, you'd probably need to get some magic items in order to be on par with the rest of the team, wouldn't you?
Yeah, probably. Realistically speaking, yeah.
Well, it's a good thing we're talking about magic items today. Not that I'm going to kill you. Sorry, that sounded like I was going to kill you. I'm not good at segues. Yes, we're talking about magic items.
Yeah, magic items. I'm actually so excited to talk about magic items. Magic items are like literally one of my favorite things in the game, because they're like it's like that. What you're saying.
As your dungeon master, I know this.
Yeah, it's like what you were saying with like the Kessel Run thing, in that like even just like, because like I'll just like read. I am that much of a nerd. I will just like flick, if I'm bored, I will like put a podcast on my phone and then just like flick through D&D Beyond and like look at the different monster blocks or weapons or items and all this kind of stuff, because there's lots of really cool small bits of lore in there, like particularly with the monsters and their description pages, but like even just like one or two little lines that are in like you get it a lot more with your like legendary and artifact items, where you will get like maybe a small paragraph of lore description as well, like, oh, this was forged by the clerics of this god to defeat this specific monster or whatever. And I just love that. So like making that stuff for myself is really fun, because it's like it gives you the opportunity to like hint at like past like deep lore stuff that you probably haven't written down but have in your head, and you can just kind of like
most of my lore only exists in my head.
Oh totally same here. Like it floats around a lot.
It's funny you'd actually mention some of the legendary stuff, because I was only just reading the Moonblade stuff a while ago.
I love the Moonblade.
Super cool. They're like a legacy blade, so like it passes down the family, and it will skip one of your sons or daughters if it thinks they're a bastard. Like if it thinks that I don't mean the literal sense bastard, I mean it will skip them if it think they're not a worthy person.
Yeah.
It'll be like, oh, that was my grandfather's blade, and now my mother's blade, and now it's not passing to me. Why not? Oh, because you're shit, that's why. Like the blade will choose you only if you are worthy, and instead it will go dormant until one within your bloodline, however far that has to be down the line, one of you is worthy to wield it again.
That's some real cool. Like Anduril stuff there. I love it.
Flame of the West.
Oh, I love it. Well, no, Narsil is the Flame of the West. Anduril. No, sorry, Narsil. No, I'm an idiot. Sorry, I got it wrong.
Narsil is the original.
Yeah, and Anduril is the Shards of Narsil, and Anduril is the Flame of the West. Yeah, Jesus Christ, man. You wrote your goddamn. I got my degree based on an essay I wrote in this shit. Like.
So I mean, like, if you're ever going to look at like world building as a true study of like mythology and history and stuff like that, no one did it better than Tolkien.
Yeah.
He had the expertise, and he built a world and a history and a creation myth and everything that would rival anything that was come up with, whether it be Egyptian, Greek, Norse. It's expansive and as deep as any of those real world mythologies, which were presumably concocted by hundreds, if not thousands, of people over hundreds of years and stuff like that. Where little myths were added here and there about various gods and all that stuff. And this one man came up and basically wrote his own thing, top to bottom,
Yeah, that I always love that the idea is like J.R. Tolkien made a world that he happened to write books about.
It was very much a world building thing first, and then I guess I'll write a story about something that happened in the world at one point. A ring, really, why not?
Good old J.R.
Right, I'm curious about how you use magic items in your game. How do you implement them? How do you decide who gets them? How do you decide how powerful they are, or when a party gets them? Do you have certain kind of milestones that you have, like by level 6, each member of the party should have blank?
Yeah, I usually like to have everyone have like a magic item just to be kind of their signature kind of thing, like not super early on, but like we'll say between levels like 5 and 8, I'd start like giving out like your nothing crazy. Although I did that by accident when I started DMing, but like now that I'm looking back and if I were thinking about how I would do it now, yeah, like levels 5 to 8 is where I think I'd start like handing out like your +1 magic items maybe, or something that does like maybe like a D4 extra elemental damage, or even maybe a D6 or something like that. That's the kind of scale I would go with that, or maybe like something that gives you like a minor beneficial ability based on like either like a short or long rest cooldown. That kind of stuff is where I'd go with your early levels. Something that like, see, I always want if I'm given a magic item, I want it, particularly if it's like a weapon or either a weapon or like something that like an arcane focus or something like that for a spellcaster, that kind of equivalent. I absolutely want it to feel impactful. Like if you're given it, you want it to be used and you want it to be feel like it is useful.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of like, those are kind of always the first things on my mind, is just like keeping the power scale relative, so that particularly because you might not give them all out at the same time. So you don't want to make a mistake with the power level, give a magic item out to one person you've more planned in the line, and then you realize, this is a bit too powerful. I've also based the rest of those items that I was going to, particularly if you're homebrewing here, I've also based the rest of the items that I've given and going to give the party on how powerful this one is. So now I have a whole thing here where I'm going to have to like work through this and have some awkward conversations. I just try and I want it to be impactful but like balanced is, I suppose, the goal, and then you just gotta try your best to get there.
Like you said, 5 to 8 I think is a good round. That at some point in that range, I think each member of the party should have one probably rare magic item.
Yeah, rare is the highest I would go in rarity, between 5 to 8.
I think when you get into your very rares, you're probably knocking 9 to 12, maybe 9 to 13, something like that in that ballpark.
Totally. I think the tiers, like the way you conceive like the tiers of D&D, where you've got your like level, I think those are a really good guide for how rare your items should be as well.
Absolutely, yeah. You can just do it in 5s a lot of the time, I find.
Yeah, totally.
Like 1 to 5, it's commons and uncommons. 6 to 10, you're looking at rares and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah, sorry. And I totally give like common magic items to like maybe like 1 or 2 common magic items to my party. Like pre level 5, like 1 to 5. I totally, because the common ones tend to be like just very minorly beneficial and wouldn't be game breaking, and a lot of the common ones aren't even like damaging magic items either. They're usually like utility or just something fun.
Absolutely, yeah. So I gave you guys a torch of continual flame.
Oh yeah.
Pretty early on, like before level 5. Actually, no, it was around level 3 or 4.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was around level 3.
Yeah. Pardon me. But I mean, like you said, kind of inconsequential stuff like that. But I mean, magic items can be. And also, I think you also, because we talked about it last week, one of the NPCs died. You got his. He had a poncho-style mantle kind of thing he wore, but it had a magical ability where if you put up the hood as an action, and it shrouds your face in magical shadow, so you can see out of it, but no one else can see your face, and it kind of hides your identity. And that came into play a lot because you had to go into a country where you were kind of not. It was your home country, but you were kind of wanted by some of the people in charge at the time, and you wanted to hide your face. And that became very, very kind of key in disguising who you were.
Hell yeah, that still gets used now as well.
Sorry?
That still gets used now as well.
It does, yeah. They can be really useful, but also not, like you said, not game breaking.
Yeah.
Like something can be useful in a lot of situations without having to be something that is abused.
Yeah.
And kind of overused to resolve a lot of issues.
Yeah, a magic item doesn't have to be Excalibur to be good.
Absolutely. In fact, like even something as simple as like an uncommon blade, that glows when orcs are nearby, could be a very cool thing. It may not come up all the time, but that one time your sword is glowing and you're like, oh no, orcs nearby. There's great moments that can come out of that.
I love stuff like that as well, because it gives the DM an opportunity to work in like a story thing, but it also so it gives you an opportunity to kind of either hint at something, or like you, as in like, say you have that where it's like one of the Hobbit blades where it glows when there's orcs nearby. Sorry, Sting does that. It's like Sting
does
where
that, yeah.
where it glows when there's an orc nearby. Say you have a character with a blade like that does specifically glow when there's orcs nearby, and you have a party of orc bandits that are about to attack the party while they're camping for the night. That person's on watch and they don't see anything, but then the blade at their side starts to glow, and then so like that you get to play that like dramatic beat of, oh no, like something is happening and I'm aware, but you simultaneously give that character a character moment to be like, oh no, I have to warn everybody there's orcs coming, and you instantly reinforce the value of the item.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned about like having a dramatic kind of, how would you put it? Having kind of a dramatic beat with a weapon or an item, or having it kind of like have a history to it to a degree. Like so Sting is a good example, because Sting was obviously an Elvish blade. No one really knows the origin of it, because maybe you do and I just don't. But it's an Elvish blade. It was found in the Troll Horde.
Yes, sorry, yeah,
it was Bilbo's sword for a while, and then he passed it on to Frodo. And that there's kind of a cool legacy that comes with that.
I love the reason why it's named Sting as well.
Because it stabbed a spider in the face, and the spider went, it stings.
Sting is my bane. Sting is my name. I am the spider's bane. Is the little line, is a little couplet about it.
Oh, I only know the scene from the movie.
Oh no, you should read The Hobbit, man. It's only like 75 pages.
I know. I'm not a I'm not a great reader. Audiobooks, that's my thing.
It is very much more of a children's book though, but it's still really enjoyable. I like it a lot. But yeah, that is it's Bilbo puts the ring on, I think, and he goes invisible inside the forest, and there's loads of these spiders, and they're like wrapping up everyone else, and he goes around cutting them free, and then like stabbing the spiders, and they can't see him or the sword. I think they can only see the sword because he's wearing the ring, so this sword is like floating around and stabbing them, and they're like, oh, what's this? And he's like, Sting is my name, I am the spider's bane. Oh god, man, there's some great stuff in The Hobbit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do love The Hobbit, because it kind of brings things back down to,
it's a much smaller scale. It's a
smaller scale. It's a personal quest as opposed to a world is in jeopardy.
There's still a huge dragon and stuff in it too, but yeah, it's a much smaller story.
And if in the movie they kind of try to play it into the overall thing where Gandalf isn't in it for the dwarves. He's like, there's a red dragon in this mountain. If it chooses to side with the enemy, we're in even bigger trouble. Which I thought was it's a justifiable way to be concerned on a larger scale about why Smaug is there. One thing do you work history into your items? Do you think about who the previous owner of this blade? I'm sticking on swords because it's a pretty common magic item. But do you think about like who the previous owner was, how or where it got made, why it was made?
Yeah, I like putting that kind of stuff in, because I think it just makes it cooler without you can make something really cool without adding any actual game power to it, just by giving it a really fun, a really cool or interesting description. So like I made so my players had a boss battle in this specific area, and it was a temple that had sunk in an earthquake and appeared in in an area that was influenced by the hells that they were in. And when they beat the monster in there, the monster had destroyed part of a tomb that was hidden under the throne room in this area. And when they went in there was like a bunch of loot there, because it was literally the tomb of like a royal family. Right, so I put a bunch of I thought about what I wanted to put in there, and like specifically based on the culture that it was there and who those people were. So what it was in there, it was a tomb. It was a more like a keep really, from a country that I have called Pontamalud, which is a very like Greco-Roman style place. So I put in a folding boat, because they're a nation of like very powerful seafarers, and I specifically said it's like a Grecian style folding boat. When it comes up, so it's like it's
where it's like
it's like a Greek trireme. Yeah. When it kind of sets out, like the big one is like the big ones you see in, like, if you ever watch, it's a terrible movie, but 300 Rise of an Empire.
I've seen it. Yeah.
It's like the boats in that, and then I also put in.
Start me on Zack Snyder.
Yeah, look at that. Then I put in 2 other ones then there as well. I put in 3 other ones, because when I did it, I wanted to have basically I had 4 players, and I wanted a magic item for each player, and then I put in 2 like party utility items.
Yeah, right? I like doing that as well. It's nice.
Yeah, I always try and do that if I'm giving out a bunch of if it's like a treasure hoard, I'll usually try and put in like one thing for each player.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah, if it's a treasure hoard, absolutely. You know, if it's a case of Sometimes it's like
A
I
single
don't know.
boss is not gonna like individual treasure versus a treasure hoard is what we're kind of talking here, really. Do you know,
Yeah,
if it's
exactly.
like a
Yeah,
single boss battle and one person and you're just fighting them and leaving, yeah. But if it's like you're fighting a dragon and a dragon is going to have a treasure hoard, then you can be like, okay, one thing for you, one thing for you, one thing for you. I just like this item. I'm going to chuck this in here. Do you know, that's kind of how I do a lot of it.
yeah.
Like with that one, it was like I had so the party items I had in there were a folding boat that was styled like a Greek trireme to specifically match to where it is, to kind of hint at where it is.
Of course,
and they've
yeah.
been kind of following this bit of a quest line as well. Then there's an item called the Balance of Harmony, which is a scales that you can put. I think it's 10 silver piece worth gems on the scales, and it takes 10 minutes to cast. It'll cast Detect Good and Evil, and that's all it does. Or you can use holy water on either side to balance the scales as well. It'll do the same. And I put that in there because the keep that was from was the family of was basically the family who had been that generation's oracle for the goddess of justice. So I put that in there to hint at that. Those were the kind of utility ones. And then for my party members, I gave my blood hunter a javelin and lightning that looked like Zeus's thunderbolt.
Very cool. Yeah.
And then I gave my rogue it's like a mithril and silver whip. It's a corpse slayer whip, but it's basically styled after the Morning Star whip from Castlevania. I was telling you about this before.
Yeah.
And then there was I think a mantle of spell resistance as well, and then I can't remember the third. A fire elemental gem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
they're always a fun one.
Yeah, because I like stuff like that as well, because like that's powerful, but it's only single use.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because in a really, and I'm pretty sure I've given you guys a couple of those.
Yeah, that's actually why I put it in. That I was like, do you know what? These are really, because you'd given us 2 or 3 of those in our first campaign, and I was trying to think of another item to put in, and I was like, John is a pretty powerful character already. Has some good magic items now. A lot of achievements, lots filled. I was like, like a fire elemental gem would be like the perfect thing for a wildfire druid. Now, it didn't end up getting taken by my wildfire druid. Right? I intended the boat as a party thing, but we have a sailor in the party, so I was like, like it'll be a party thing, but he'll sail, right? And then I was like, fire elemental gem, wildfire spirit druid. He'll gravitate to that. Other way.
Okay.
But you gotta be prepared for that when you put magic items in.
Absolutely. I mean, like I will typically, if I am very much intending a magic item to be for a specific person, when they are describing themselves rummaging through all the treasure and stuff like that, I will turn to you and I will say, Martin, you find this thing, and that's kind of intended. The unspoken hint is that you found it. It's intended for you.
Yeah.
And then I'll do that.
Start doing that now.
Yeah. I think on 1 or 2 occasions I did list out like 3 or 4 items that were meant for everybody, kind of meant for certain people within the party, and then did not specifically say who it was. And then people were kind of like, oh, I kind of like that bow. I kind of like that bow too. But like, I'm like, okay, the bow was meant for you, not you, and stuff like that.
We want to avoid a bit of that and cause a bit of tension at the table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really cool. Like I like that you style them to the area. I think I definitely do that as well. Like
it only makes sense though, because like if they come from that area and people can make magic items there, like fuck it, of course they'd make it in their own style.
Absolutely. I mean, like you recently got a set of armor from an Earth Elf city in my world.
I love it.
Yeah, and but I mean, like I purposely said that is very much styled like Earth Elf armor. It would only make sense that is that's where you found it. There's lots of stuff like that where like I try to make it match the theme or whatever the culture is that you're currently dealing with, and then you usually end up getting
sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you actually have a surprising amount of Elvish and/or Sylvan things for a human character.
Yeah, actually, I do. Wow, I have Elvish boots, I have Elvish armor, and I have a Sylvan spear.
A Sylvan spear, yeah. So it's kind of just weirdly panned out that way.
And I have an elf soul in my body.
That's actually true as well. The reason I bring up the history and all that stuff is there's one thing I was reading about it today and I'd forgotten, and then I thought, oh wow, that's actually because I hadn't read the books in a while, the Kingkiller Chronicles.
Ooh.
So the second book is called A Wise Man's Fear. Great books. In this one, there's a really cool thing. So I was reading. I said it a while ago. I was reading some of the Moonblade stats and lore behind those a while ago, and it reminded me, because the Moonblades have loads of previous owners, there is a thing in A Wise Man's Fear where Kvoth, the lead character, is he's granted a sword by the Adem that he gets to wield, and it's called the Sora. Before he can take ownership of it, he needs to memorize all previous owners of the sword. Now, Quoth canonically has he's like photographic memory, essentially. He's very, very smart. But even then, Quoth is the 237th wielder of the blade. So that means he has to remember in order 236 previous owners, and not even just that. I have a snippet here I'm going to read. It's about them. It's not just their name, it's about them. Like, so the way it goes is, first came Shale, who shaped me in fire for an unknown purpose. He carried me, then cast me aside. Next came Atane. Next came Finol, of clear and shining eye, much beloved by Dulcan. She herself slew to Daruna. Then was killed by Gremin at Drossen Tor. And like every single person on the list is like that. And I just think it's a fantastic world building thing. It's like you can't wield that sword until you kind of pay homage to every single previous owner of this blade. You know, that's how highly the Adem venerate their blades. I think it's really, really cool. I like working that in. I have a couple of historical things. I'm starting to build out my church, my religion in the world quite a bit, and I have a few things for that. You guys recently arrived in a town called Solaster, which is it's a cross between Bordeaux and Lourdes, heavy on the Lourdes, where it's like a religious site because a holy artifact fell there long ago. But as a result of it being a religious site, it's been a monastery, and as a result of it being a monastery, other magic items or holy artifacts have found their way there. People are like, oh, this person died. What should we do with their armor? We should keep it in one of the tombs or one of the catacombs of this place, because it's a holy place. Let's keep all of our holy relics here, you know? Hence why all the monastery is run by a bunch of martial arts trained monks, because it's like you're not taking our items. But one I do have is that, like, I know that there's one blade there that belongs to a knight, like essentially like a Crusades style knight. But he died, and his body was buried in this place because, again, he is a holy warrior. It makes sense that he would be buried someplace holy, and then therefore like a lot of his possessions are now here and kept here, and they're made sure to be polished and maintained by the monks and all that stuff. And I think that knowing at least a little bit of history around that kind of stuff makes those things way cooler when there's a bit more than just, like, don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm never going to turn my nose up if someone turns to me and goes, oh yeah, you find a flame blade short sword. I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool. I'm never going to turn my nose up at that. But at a certain point, when you're an experienced player / dungeon master, the idea of just getting yet another flame tongue, well, not flame blade, flame tongue, so I would say, flame tongue short sword is like, oh yeah, I've seen these come up in pretty much every campaign I've ever played in. But saying like, oh, it was wielded by Saint such and such of whatever, and he used it to defeat the evil dragon that such and such, whatever. Come up with your lore behind it, and that suddenly adds a whole lot more oomph to it,
Yeah, I was just trying to pull this up because just related to what you were saying there. I have I introduced a sword into my campaign recently that my blood hunter got by basically defeating his kind of like, we did like a personal backstory kind of quest, and he beat the.
Oh yes, you mentioned this before.
So this is it. I've mentioned it before, but I did, just to give you an idea, I did something quite similar. It's called Eclipse Edge. It's a longsword. So this longsword was forged by clerics of Galark, which is the moon goddess in my world, with steel harvested from a comet that fell during a lunar eclipse centuries ago. Its ghostly white blade shimmers and shifts in the light like quicksilver, changing with the waxing and waning of the moon. Celestial runes run up the center of the blade and glow a faint pale green with each movement of the sword.
See, I love that. Like, and that's all just obviously in the item description, right, as well. So the players can read that. Pardon me. But I really, really love that, because it just adds a little bit more to the one. A description is always great, more so than this is a flaming blade. Say, talk about it, the gilded, because everything can be gilded, Martin. The gilded handle of the blade,
including the point you're making.
And yeah, exactly. Talk about like the style, the runes that run up the side of the blade itself. Loads of stuff like that, and I think that just really makes it like That can give a good visual of it, and then of course just have a brief description of what it doesn't have to be like a huge thing. I'm actually just looking for your one for.
Ooh, I do love the Moonslayer's description.
Yes. 1 second, I'm going to bring it up. So the Moonslayer is like we said before, it's a Sylvan weapon. This ancient fey weapon was once used by ancient elves to hunt deadly lycanthropes. However, after its haft was broken by the dread wolf Fendril, it was left to fall into disrepair and forgotten. Recovered and eventually restored by the archfey known as the Morrigan, the spear now sheds its pale pink light on the battlefield once more. And then I described that it's silvery and has a faint pink glow to it, and so on. But again, I'm Kessel running once again because we haven't gotten into. I don't even plan really to get into the whole Fendril thing. Maybe I will in the future campaign on this world. Who knows? But it's very much like, ooh, the Dreadwolf Fendril. Who's that? And it's like it's still just giving off this idea that there is a greater world out there. Instead of like, I mean, I could very easily say that you picked up a spear which was either made or used by a member of your family or by one of the bad guys you're currently chasing or something like that. But then that really narrows the whole scope of the world, Just throwing out these weird kind of lines and going at Dreadwolf Fendril, yeah, and throwing something out and then not at all following up on it unless someone wants to or you have to. But then I think that can make for like it makes the world seem bigger than it is.
Yeah.
And you can always expand that way further if you want to at a later point then.
Totally. Yeah. It's just this like nebulous thought that will or concept that will catch a player and they'll be like, oh, like the Dreadwolf Fendril, Fae on the moon. Wow. And then like, what does it? And then like just from my own experience, anyway, anything time something like that gets thrown out, even if it's in a movie or whatever. Like, oh, perfect example. I was watching Mortal Kombat 2021 last week.
Go on.
Or was it? Yeah, I was watching Mortal Kombat 2021, and I think there's scenes in Nether Realm or no, you know what it was? I watched that, and I actually did enjoy that. I actually enjoyed it. It's fun. Not a great movie, but fun. But then I went and I started rewatching the cutscenes from Mortal Kombat 11, and they do a whole like Avengers Endgame style thing from Mortal Kombat 11 for the story mode. It's actually really, really good. But there's a bit where they're going through Netherrealm, and you can see all these armies marching up, and you can see what Netherrealm looks like. And I was like, that's cool. And then I had a thought in my head, go, what's the rest of Netherrealm look like? Like, what does a village in Netherrealm look like? How do people live every day? And that's sort of like how, like when you put stuff like that in your description, where it's like, oh, like the like Fae on the moon use weapons like these to hunt down like lycanthropes. It's like, oh, what does a moon werewolf look like? Like that's the kind of thing you want to. Yeah. That's the kind of like thought process or like inquisitiveness you want to get involved with your players.
Where we're definitely straying off of magic items, but that's a really good thing for magic item building, but also world building in general. If you have it, and Matt Goebel does this very, very well in certain, because he'll come up with like phrases or terms of what you call it, terms of phrase. What sayings and stuff like that cultures would have, and they might be like, proverbs and stuff like that, and you might be like, oh, that person's working harder than a Redalian fisherman, and it's like, oh, a Redalian fisherman must be known to be very hard working, So it just informs the world in a very subtle but very real way, which is something I absolutely love when it comes to world building, and it can be applied to your magic items as well. Say that, oh, this was once wielded by the Flame Knight Dargul. And it's like, who the fuck is Dargul? Why is he named the Flame Knight? That's amazing. It just kind of informs things in that way. I have a question for you. How do you handle crafting magic items in your world? Do you allow your players to do it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I stick to the rules that are in Xanathar's, because I think they're actually pretty good. I've some quibbles with them, some small quibbles with certain things, but like in general, I find them very, very solid. And like I particularly like the thing where, so the rule is if you have proficiency in either Arcana or the skill needed to craft the item, you can make the magic item. Which
so if it's a wooden magic item, you need carpenter's tools or wood carver's tools, or if it's a sword, you probably need smithing tools.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've gunslinger on my party, so you got gunsmithing proficiency. So he's now so like he hasn't made them himself yet, but like he's been like crafting magic ammunition from different monster bits, which I love because like it's there again, like it's something that will, I suppose it's a temporary magic item in the sense that it's ammunition, so it does run out, but you can have it for long enough that it is impactful without completely overshadowing or overstepping its bonds. So I like that quite a lot. So yeah, like in terms of crafting it, yeah, like he's made a bunch of stuff. Like he's made like the silver smoke bombs, specifically to mess with lycanthropes.
We talked about that in one of our home talking about our home brew and our world building stuff. I think we listed out some of our magic items and things like that. And that those silver smoke bombs were really cool to use against lycanthropes and stuff like that. Yeah,
my party are actually usually pretty good, pretty solid for being like really creative and coming up with like interesting magic items rather than just like can I make like a sword that just does like fire damage. It'll usually be like, I want to make this thing and can it do this and this and this, and like naturally you kind of have to scale back a little, like okay, like we can work. I like the concept. We can work with this. Let's go. Let's have a conversation about this.
That actually kind of leads on to my next question. How do you approach the creation of a magic item when a player comes to you and says, "I want to make," because we know what I know one of your players has already done this. They made frost bullets for their gun.
Yeah.
When a player says, "I want to make frost bullets," out of these monster components, you go, "Cool, yeah, that sounds great." Do you then ask the player, how do you want them to function? Or do you then go away yourself and you decide how they turn out in the end?
Okay, so majority of my players, well, like at least half of my players, this is still their first campaign, so they're not super experienced with like thinking how magic items work and stuff, because it's not really a thing you kind of come into until you start DMing, really.
Very much so, yeah.
So like I know it's usually they will kill something, like, because the other rule in Xanthars is you need proficiency, but you also need appropriate monster bits.
Which is a mechanic I really, really enjoy as well.
Yeah, I like that too. It feels very like monster. Like I've only played a little bit of Monster Hunter, but it feels very Monster Hunter in that you hunt down like this specific kind of like aberration or whatever, and like you need like its essence to make this specific thing. Like it's cool. It just kind of gives it a bit of flavor, and it also lets you kind of tack quest lines onto items, which is always the fun.
Yeah.
Because that then when you tack a quest line onto either making or finding an item, it makes it feel a bit more earned, a bit more special, rather than just
absolutely. If you went and you had to go and kill a dragon to get your dragon scale mail armor, you're going to be like, I didn't just buy this. I went into a lot of trouble killing a dragon and getting it crafted and did a whole thing. I think that really it makes the item more personal to you, because not only is it something you own, but something that you went to a lot of trouble to get and acquire and craft.
And now it's got a story attached to it as well.
Exactly, yeah. Which is exactly what you write in your magic item description when you're drawing up the stats.
Yep.
See, full circle.
Yeah. But sorry, I kind of lost the plot a bit there. But yeah, that's with that. It's the monster things in terms of like when they come to me and ask me about it. So like, they killed a frost giant zombie. So my rogue came to me and was like, what could I make? Like I think he took his heart. And it was like, what could I make from this? I want to make bullets from this. He actually went to an NPC and was like, can you? I have this. Could you make me bullets from this? And that's kind of the brief I was given mostly. Was like, what could we do? And then I just thought about, well, if it was just a frost giant, probably that would just be like an ice element added onto it. But the fact that it's a frost giant zombie, I was like, ooh, what if I were to like?
You gave it.
I split the damage between cold and necrotic.
Very appropriate, I think.
Yeah, I think you can just pull a lot from. Because if they're making something, unless it's like a mundane thing, like those silver smoke bombs were a mundane thing. All he did was disassemble a smoke bomb and then in with the smoke with the charge mixed like a pouch of silver powder, powdered silver, so that when the charge goes off and spreads the smoke, there's like flecks of silver in the smoke. But
kind of like a chaff grenade.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of thing. I think you can pull a lot of cues and a lot of guidelines from just like the rules themselves and what you need from it, and like that you can put a lot of inspiration from that as well for the ability, like particularly if they don't come to you like I would like it to do X. If they're like I want to make something cool out of this, that kind of gives you a bit more room. Although I do still like it if someone comes to me and is like I have this, I want to make something that does this, can this do it, will this suffice? And that's still fun like as well, because then you can be like okay, so that's what you want to do, and then you kind of I like it's almost like reverse engineering, because they give you the final product like I wanted to do this, and you're like okay, I gotta reverse engineer this back to like mechanics for the game. Then I enjoy that challenge. I've always enjoyed kind of like making stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm open to the idea if a player wants, like when Mike got some fire gargoyle
heart,
fire gargoyle heart. Jesus Christ. That was really difficult to say. But he got one of those when you guys were in the Feywild, in the side of a volcano, and then he brought it back. He's like, I want to make a sword out of this. And I'm like, yeah, sure, we can do that. What do you want the sword to do? Do you want it to be like just straight fire damage and stuff like this? And then we kind of came to the idea that like it can do some fire damage, but it's more versatile because you can spend some of its charges to do this this ranged strike where you basically swing the sword and an arc of flame comes off of it. And we workshopped that, and there was times when I definitely had to be like, okay, what you're asking is a bit too much, because the item you have to make, or the time frame that you have to try and make this magic item, is very much you'll at best get a rare item out of this or something like that, you know. So we got to make sure that the power level stays within that. So I'm open to like players approaching me and saying like, oh yeah, you have I want to make this, and I would like to be able to do this and this and this, and I go, right, it can do probably 2 of the 3 things you want. The DM I think has final say on how it 100%. Works. But if you wanted to have it's like if Mike comes to me and says, yeah, I want to have some sort of ranged effect, I'm like, cool, ranged effect, it can do, and I'll set the amount of times it can do it and the damage dice and all that, but it will very much have that as an ability, you know. So I'm open to the idea, but yeah, I think the DM has to have final say, because at the end of the day, the DM is the one trying to keep the campaign operating in a fair manner. And particularly if one player is more experienced, it doesn't make it super fair if they come to you and they know all the mechanics, so they feel that it should be X, Y, and Z, and you have a new player then who doesn't really know how to build magic items, and then they have maybe something really cool like a dragon fang, but they don't know what to ask for when it comes to crafting a magic item. I think the DM's your best friend there, where
I think that's where the DM steps in as a
guide you, and they can absolutely
reading each other's minds.
Yeah. Finishing each other's sandwiches. Oh god,
Christ!
That was so dumb.
I knew you were gonna say that and all. Oh god,
that was good. We've talked about this before. You would refer to them, I think, as vestiges. Actually, sorry, before we get onto that, we'll follow on that same topic.
Put a pin.
How do you take requests as a DM for magic items?
General rule, no. Rule, no. What I may do though is if someone comes to me with a request and is like, I want this item, and right, I'm not calling anyone out here, but I'm going to give an example.
Definitely Mike.
No, actually not Mike.
Okay.
So one of my players came to me and was like, I would was Castlevania season 3 just finished. And,
of course it has.
And like, God, I love that show. It's so D&D as well. But
it's such a good show.
Yeah, they came to me and were like, could I make like the Morning Star whip from Castlevania? And I was like, the one that like makes people explode when they hits them. and they were like, yeah, I'd like something like that. And I was like, okay, I think they were around level, I'd say between 7 and 9 at this point. And I was like, That's a bit much for the level you're at, because like if you want, I was like, do you want it to function exactly as it functions in Castlevania? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so if it were to function exactly like it functions in Castlevania, that'd have to be like something based on like the open palm, like exploding hand technique. Like,
or something
like,
akin to
it would have to be like an almost instant, it would be a save or instant death. Like that would be like putting like a disintegrate in a whip. Like,
yeah,
and they were like, oh, okay, I get what you mean there. I was like, and look, in general, I also just don't do. I did also say, look, in general, I don't do requests. But I think what I did just so not to just totally shut it down, because I didn't want to. I think it was one of the first times the player had come to me and had said like either expressed interest in making a magic item or asking about getting one. And I didn't want to, like, you don't want to shut down that hard, because otherwise people might take that as a, in general, no, don't ask about magic items, and you don't want to stifle creativity.
No, so definitely not. Yeah.
What I did say was like, absolutely, because D&D is literally entirely about creativity.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like I was just like, look, I'm not going to put this in the game, just straight up. I'm not going to put it in the game. What I might do is I might put something similar in the game at a later stage when it's appropriate for you. But as in general, no, I'm not going to put the Morning Star whip in. Now, fast forward about, I think, a year and a half after that conversation, I was trying to think up what magic items I wanted to put in that crypt, and it came to
Yeah.
him, and I was like, you know what? Not exactly that, but something that feels similar is what I'm going to do. So I was like, oh, Goddess of Justice. What do the gods usually hate? Undead. Yeah, cool. Corpse Slayer items. Started looking through the Corpse Slayer items. There's a Corpse Slayer whip. So I took a Corpse Slayer whip. I reskinned it, made it sound a lot cooler, and tied it to that specific faith and that area. And then he found that and was like, and he clocked it. They clocked it what it was, like, straight away.
Yeah.
Almost. And I was like, oh, cool. And like, yeah, it was a way more toned down version of the Morning Star. I think I called it the Dawn Star whip. And like, it was way, way, way more toned down, but it was similar in look and function, and it did extra damage against undead, which felt appropriate for the Morning Star.
Yeah.
Whip. So yeah, in that way, I sort of half took the request there, in that, like, I didn't put straight up that item in there, but I put something in there that still felt impactful and gave a similar feeling and purpose.
I've had a similar thing happen. My typical rule is a flat no.
Yeah.
If you want to request a magic item, go away and craft it.
Yeah.
You know,
totally.
Spend your downtime crafting the item, because if you come to me and you say, oh, I want this particular type of sword that does fire damage, I'm like, great. Find a fire elemental, kill it, use its ashes then to craft a sword or whatever.
I think it's a lot easier to say that now as well, because you can just point to, yeah, look, there's the crafting rules, super clear what you need to do, what you need to have, and who you need to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Because before Xanathar's, like, crafting was very...
The PHP crafting rules are very hit and miss, I find.
Wishy-washy is how I describe them.
Wishy-washy is a good way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. Whereas Xanathar's has a way more cohesive set of rules, where it's like, here's how long it takes, here's the rarity of it, here's what it costs, here's what you need, like, in terms of a monster. I even think it tells you the challenge rating of the monster based on the level of the item you're trying to create. So yeah, absolutely. It very much... It's a way more cohesive system for crafting than we had prior to Xanathar's.
Totally.
But
and like, in terms of, like, I love it as well, because it makes it a lot easier to keep everything in check. Like, for perfect example, I have one very rare item in my party at the moment. One. Yeah. And it's obviously powerful, but like, everything else is either rare or lower, and but no one there's no, like, dip or, like, noticeable lack and everything, because I've made it a point to try and keep everyone either in, like, I like it to be like a level, like, in terms of how it goes, like, power, I like it to be level for everything, and then have occasional jumps where people get a spotlight.
Yeah, I would say that's fair, definitely. But I think in terms of the request thing, flat out no. Yeah. I don't if you say I want a Holy Avenger, I'm like, no, I'm not putting that in.
I think even I did say that once, actually.
I think you did, but I didn't give you a Holy Avenger. But I'm like, I'm not going to just put it in that you're going to stumble across it in a tomb or anything. That's not really my style. I did it once, kind of, before, where in campaign 1, Dan was playing Drunan, the dwarf rogue, and he, as a dwarf, he already has resistance to poison. And he asked, is there any way that I could, like, train my body over time by, like, ingesting small bits of poison to, like, over a long period of time, get immunity to poison? And I'm like, I was kind of humming and hawing about it. And then, I don't know how long after this was, maybe a couple levels, you guys ended up going to the Gaping Maw, the 68th, I can't remember, 80 something. It's where Demogorgon is from in the Abyss, though. Yeah. And you went into this UNT temple and fought a whole bunch of UNT, and they had a huge treasure hoard there. And when I was designing all these high level, they were all very rare magic items, but you guys were already you were like level 14 or something like that at this point.
I think we were pretty high level around then.
Yeah, you were very high level. So then I actually ended up giving him some armor, some leather armor that was made of snake skin that granted immunity to poison, which he was quite happy with. I did it just because I was already creating magic items, and I was like, what do I put onto this? And I'm like, no, Dan already kind of wants immunity to poison. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I didn't actively go out of my way to put that in. I needed a trait for a magic item. He already mentioned he liked the idea of poison immunity. I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, I already had that there. That's easy, But I like it. The thing is, if a player comes to you and says, I'd like this item, the best rule, I think, is just to go and tell them, look, that's fine, you can craft it. Yeah. There's downtime coming up after this arc. You can spend X amount of weeks making that. Brilliant. But I'm not going to just have this in a goblin horde where you could just pick it up and be like, oh, that was easy. It's got to be kind of earned, whether that be something that is crafted yourself or whether it's something that is part of a larger quest. But again, I just don't like the idea of requesting magic items. I think part of the surprise as well.
Yeah, it cheapens it.
Yeah, part of the surprise is like, oh, that is finding a magic item, being like, oh my god, look,
it's like Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. It spoils the surprise if you say I want a Holy Avenger and then I give you a Holy Avenger.
Yeah.
You're like, cool, I got the thing I wanted, but you're in no way surprised.
Yeah.
Whereas I gave you a sword called Judgment.
Yeah.
Which was like a
great
really
name for a
legendary
fucking sword as well. Oh my god.
For a paladin sword, yeah. But I gave you Judgment, and that was a really cool sword. And I think that was way more interesting than if I just handed you the Holy Avenger. You know.
Hell yeah. I love that sword. I love.
Hell yeah, because we were just talking about the Abyss.
Hey.
I wanted to bring this up and I started a second ago. You would refer to them as vestiges.
Yes.
This is a thing from us being two Critical Role nerds. I would refer to them as evolving magic items. Do you use them in your campaign?
Yes, I have made. So they're actually sort of. My party are actually kind of hunting them down at the moment. They have researched them a lot and come across a lot, and they interacted with a fragment of one on their very first quest. Or their first big arc. Like the first big arc, they interacted with a fragment of one that was being used to power a dark ritual. And that was sort of their first interaction with them. And now they've kind of come around to them again after they're level 11 now. So once they hit around level, I'd say like 9, 8, around level 9, they started picking up bits more and more lore about it. And then they started looking into like how the original Battle of the Gods and what happened to stuff like that. Because the whole thing in my world was the final Battle of the Gods was decided when the rest of the gods like came together to forge the first god weapons to take down the God of Darkness, and then after the battle they were destroyed, and elements of them and shards have been split over and shattered and spread over the world, and then those things went on to become legendary weapons for other heroes and villains and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I have them introduced to my world. I have one that. No, sorry, I can't actually say that.
I don't spoil it.
I have, they specifically researched them at like the biggest and oldest library in my world. So I give them, actually I'll pull it up here because I have my DM notes on this computer. But I will pull up the lore that I give them to do it, because I think when it comes to those, you really, really need to set a proper expectation for them, but also like a proper limitation for them, which is probably a bad way to phrase it. In that, if your characters you want to put them in the perspective of these are like end tier things. These are like end of campaign or very late to late middle campaign things. In that, like if they hear about them early on, they're not going to discover them in the next 3 levels. It's going to be an end game kind of plot line. I think. What do you reckon about that? While I panically look for specifically the section notes that I wrote with that.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, I use them as well. I think I use them a little bit differently than you do. So in Critical Role, they're, I think, a similar thing to you, where they're kind of like god weapons or weapons that were used in like a divine war, and they're created by gods or by leftover remnants of gods and stuff like that, and therefore they're insanely powerful. And usually the ones you get in the Critical Role books and in Explorer's Guide to Wildmount have 3 tiers to them. So you can get them at like a mid to low range level, like maybe 5+, and it's an appropriate level.
That's
I
probably should have said
nicely.
That's sort of my preference to they would be start from mid tier and then go on. I think because if you do that at lower tiers, you have a chance to give players more variety in their magic items, particularly if it's like their primary one. And you can do fun stuff and kind of test out what they like the most, and then kind of maybe feed that back into your final design if you're going to give them a vestige.
Yeah, I like that. Like I see what you're saying. Like, are you saying like if you are to give them one of these vestiges at its lowest tier at level 5 or 6, then that kind of limits them later on. So because you give them a longsword that's going to get better. That means they're using the same longsword until the end of the game, and they don't get to use other variety stuff.
I kind of like, I think it's just purely because I played so many like character action games when I was younger, and like they usually have the thing of you'll start off with your main weapon and then you'll usually get some kind of elemental different kind of types of weapons as you go through the game, and they'll usually be like have different effects and you can switch between them and use them for specific items. And I think that just influenced my concept on like magic items a lot, because I like to give a bit of variety. You know, a lot of my players have used the same stuff a lot of the time, but I like to try and introduce some stuff like my one character has a flame tongue dagger, but he also has that whip, and then he has guns as well, so he has options. Similarly with my blood hunter uses dual swords, but he also has a really nice masterwork longbow that he uses, and a javelin and lightning. And then like with your spellcasters feel they have so much variety inherently from their kit that like magic items, I tend to with them I try to do more like accentuating things. But I'm still looking for that goddamn session notes where I wrote, because I wrote like 3 or 4.
I get where you're coming from, and it does make sense that you want to kind of give them more variety. I do feel that you can kind of offset the fact that they're using the same weapon from level 5 until 20, the same longsword or something like that, by giving them kind of. I still think it's very exciting when the DM turns to you and goes, "Here's the new stats for your sword," and
yes,
you get to go, "Oh, nice!"
I lost my shift last week, absolutely.
Yeah, because you had a spear you've had for a good few levels now, and you killed a high level Fae with it, and then the spear kind of evolved, and now it has new abilities and stuff like that.
And they're so good. Oh god, I've read that thing like 50 times. I'd say I just if I'm like on my computer absentmindedly, I won't even realize I'm doing it. I'll open up my character sheet and click on the item description and just read it. But yeah, just to be more on point about it, with vestiges, I actually stick pretty closely to Matt Mercer's rules. I really liked how they were implemented in campaign 1 and what I've seen of them in campaign 2. I'm a bit behind. But like specifically campaign 2, how Ford's journey with the Star Razor has gone, I really enjoyed that. So I fairly heavily I would say I found the foundations of my vestige stuff are Matt Mercer's rules for them, and I take a lot of inspiration from the vestiges that he has made in them, particularly in like their form. I use that a lot as a guideline for power, because I just really enjoy how they're made up. But I do have so in terms of in my world I call them shards of the beginning. Which is a bit pantsy, but yeah.
No, I like it. It's good.
So I have 3 specific ones that my guys found through have gained knowledge of through research, because they specifically they basically paid a specific librarian at the oldest and best library in the world to research this stuff further, and this is what they came up with. It might be a bit wordy, so I will apologize, but I have these 3. So they researched people who had through history who were known to be in possession of these things, to try and get more info. So the first one was a person called Aradon Gale Speaker, a legendary hero of the Ganassi people on Musfell. He was said to be able to call and banish storms with a word. Lightning bent to his will and armoured him, and the winds themselves guided him on his journey. Also known as Aradon Stormwreathed, he led an army of barbarian tribes in the final battle of the Jotunkrieg, where he broke the storm giant leader Donnerstein's magics and cast him from the peak of the mountain. The oldest sagas of the Ganassi say that that Aradon disappeared in a flash of lightning after defeating Donnerstein and has not been seen since. And I kind of just did stuff like that. I have another one then. I like this one a lot actually. The Death Mask of the Charioteer. The Charioteer is the god of death in my world, and he is very heavily kind of inspired by Charon, the ferryman.
I was going to say, absolutely. That's what you go.
One of the treasures of the Church of Scorfa is the god's name. It was stolen long ago by a djinn during a raid of a gathering of the church on its holiest day, the winter solstice. The djinn disappeared in a gout of flame, taking the death mask with him to the fire plane. Ever since, champions of Scorfa have journeyed to the fire plane to recover their lost relic, but none have succeeded. A consequence of this is that worshippers of Scorfa commonly swear oaths of vengeance against djinn kind.
I like that you have. I do like the idea of like following a trail, that some of these things are known. You know, like the legendary swords of such and such, or the legendary mask of this. You know, they are things that are known by the world, but like their location is kind of like.
Oh, I like
it has been lost to time for one reason or another, or maybe they know where it is, like they know it's on the plane of fire, but it's like it's going to take some pretty powerful, skilled people to go there and recover it, you know. And but I like that because it also kind of like it's kind of like almost like sitting down for a session 0 with your players and pitching a campaign. You're pitching a specific quest line and saying it'll involve going to the plane of fire. You'll have to probably defeat a very high level djinn, whatever else, you know. And I think that's really, really cool to like to give the players that, and that all again, it's like an in lore session 0 where you're pitching them various quests, and then they can go, I think we'll take this one, and that's really, really cool.
I always love an opportunity to put a bit of deep lore out there as well, because I just love all that stuff, the real high fantasy stuff. I love putting that in little, so like, and for that stuff as well, they only got that amount of information because they invested goals, and I used the research rules. I used the research rules where you do an intelligence roll, and you can spend 50 gold to get a +1 bonus up to, I believe, a +4 bonus to the roll on top of
whatever. Something like that.
I think you can be up to +6, but so they put as much gold into it as they could. They spent the work week, and they chose the best possible place they could do it at, which is the oldest and most respected library in the world. And that's what they got from it. So like, again, like, if they had done that in another library, they probably may have only gotten one thing, but they chose their location well. And like, I think I just like to do that because it's the seed for an item if they want to go looking for that, but it's also it's like, more importantly, it's the seed of a quest, and it also gives you opportunity to add in more lore, and I love a bit of lore.
Absolutely. Like I said, that's a thing that enriches the world, so that you're not just walking through, how to put it, you're not just walking through a countryside. This countryside once belonged to the kingdom of such and such, but the kingdom fell asunder after the death of the king 500 years ago, and all this other stuff. And like, it just, even if it doesn't massively impact the session to session stuff, that's the kind of thing that draws me in as a player, and that makes me feel like there's a tone and there is a culture and stuff like that to the place I'm walking around. For our audio listeners, I'm doing quotation marks. But yeah, I think that's a very, very cool, very rich way of introducing them. You have a very in lore way of handling messages. I do not. I like vestiges, evolving weapons, whatever you want to call them. I like them because I feel like sometimes when you have a weapon that is a personal weapon to you, or a piece of armor, or anything at all, it can be anything at all. But when you have an item that is a magic item that either you acquired through defeating your arch nemesis, maybe at early levels, your personal quest involved hunting down a man who killed your parents, and then you take his sword, which used to be your father's sword, or something like that.
Yeah. I
think it's very cool to then have that sword and be like, this belonged to my father, I'm going to wield it for good, and blah, blah, blah. But then if you do that level 5 or 6, by the time you get to level 14, 15, that sword is probably going to be fine. It might be a +1 sword that does a little bit here and whatever, but it might not be the most optimal thing to use. I like when a magic item evolves with the character, because I feel like then you can continue to use that, and I think, like, from a story perspective, this fighter wielding his father's blade to try and right the world is a really, really cool concept. It would just feel a bit weird from a story perspective if, after doing all that and finally getting his father's blade, he's suddenly like, what, +3, and just throws his sword away, or just doesn't use it because there's something that's more mechanically optimal for them to use. I like it from that perspective. I don't really have a lore reason for it. I guess maybe I feel like because magic, the will of the wielder can inform the magic of the item or something like that. In my head, that's kind of a very loose reasoning behind it. But I like that idea. Like, we talked before about how, like, one of my very early influences in D&D was the community D&D episode. Yeah. And there's a character in that named Neil, and he plays, but he has the sword of Dukane, because he's from Clan Dukane. It's a +3 long sword, but he wields it because it's been in his family for generations. So there's something really cool and evocative about that. And I think that if you were to simply get a +1 sword that does a d4 ice damage, and then later on you got a +2 battle axe that did 2d6 radiant damage, and then you're just kind of chucking away or hanging on to the old magic item, or I don't know, whatever you do with it, sell it, whatever you want to do. I think it's something cool that where it's a iconic weapon or item for you, I don't know if you. I don't get me wrong. I completely see where you're coming from. Where you were like, where you're saying that it's nice to have the variety where they can use multiple things, and you're not. There's also kind of a good argument to be made for, like, you have people who are wielding have bows, but also a sword, and then they have a whip, but they also have this other weapon, and then you have guns, whatever, and you have options and variety. But there's definitely something to be said from your perspective for not pigeonholing the character into having to use this weapon because it is the mechanically strongest weapon.
I think it's probably. Sorry, go on.
Oh well, I was going to say you asked me before a few months back at this stage if the Moonslayer spear was a vestige, if it was an evolving weapon, and I told you yes, I was. But I'm like, I told you that because, but I didn't decide that when I gave it to you. Like I gave you a weapon, and then the more I tend to see where the story is going. I could decide on a whim that something is or is not a vestige, because if I feel like Mike creates a new sword or something like that, and then wants to continue using that sword because that's his sword that he made and it means something, and there's something, dramatic about that, then I will absolutely then decide, cool, that's now a vestige. That's gonna, when he hits this level, or when he does something from a powerful story beat, that's going to then evolve and get higher stats and be a more powerful weapon, because I want to encourage that person to use the thing that feels right for their character. Again, it's like imagine if Aragorn was handed Anduril, and then all of a sudden he's like,
broken.
But he uses it, and it's like, this is a really, really good sword. And then Gandalf's like, but wouldn't you like a holy avenger? And then he's like, oh really, a holy? Oh, fuck this sword. So I don't give a shit if my ancestors wielded that against Sauron and cut off his finger.
It's one thing about the movies that's a little disappointing. In the books, Anduril is a little more like a holy avenger. In that, there's like something inherently about the blade that makes evil fearful of it. Like there's in the books, he gets Anduril reforged in the first book. Like he has it threw me for a loop because I watched the movies first, but in the Fellowship he has Anduril, and towards the end of the Fellowship, where the Fellowship splits and they're on either side of the river. Just before that, when they arrive in that area, they're on a boat, or they're on an opposite riverbank, and they see an Orc patrol party patrolling on the other riverbank, and they start like drawing bows and firing at them. And Aragorn steps forward and he just draws Anduril out, and he holds it up in the light in front of him, in front of his face. And while he holds it, this like ghostly white fire flicks up the blade, and a ghostly fiery crown appears around Aragorn's head, and just the sight of this like Gondorian king with his blade in the sunlight ready to fight them sends the orcs scattering. Like, I love that. Really cool. Love that so much.
I have shamefully not actually read the books. In all my years, I've not read the books. I love the movies with an unyielding passion.
Absolutely, the movies are phenomenal. They're one of the best adaptations of anything like that ever. But like,
they're just amazing, phenomenal. I only watched them again recently. My son Tara watched them again, and oh god, those movies, they amp me up in a way that like nothing else, and they also break me down to my core with some of this most heartbreaking stuff. Like I still get really like glossy eyed when Gandalf dies, but then not really. But Gandalf dies, but then they're all out on the rocks in the sunlight afterwards, and Aragorn's like let's get them up. By nightfall, these hills will be swarming with orcs, and then Boromir's like, just let them rest for just a minute, and you see all the hobbits are floods of tears, and they're so heartbroken that he died. And even then, I know he comes back.
Yeah,
it still gets me every goddamn time.
That's so good. I actually have a question for you, Connor. I think that's a bit interesting. In terms of inspiration for your magic items, if you're homebrewing a magic item, are there any particular places you look for inspiration, like particular like media or stories or anything like that?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I guess from a mechanical perspective, I tend to start by picking, so that I get the rarity and the power level and stuff right. I tend to pick a magic item that's already in the TMG or something, and then I will change its damage type, and I will add this feature from a different magic item, and I'll kind of compound them that way. So it tends to be a mishmash of stuff like that when I'm building it from a mechanical perspective. I don't really know, to be honest. You put me in the spot here.
Sorry.
I don't think like just taking like sometimes yes, sometimes for definite. Like I the Moonslayer spear. I'm taking that as an example because it's a prominent one in our current campaign. I don't think so. I mean, you really wanted to build a spear wielder. Your character Lug is the spear wielding guy. Even his clan is their ancient artist mastering the spear. So I think that I kind of got the idea of a spear for that, and then I thought, I think I wanted to do something Fey-ish, and lycanthrope and Fey adjacent. So because you were fighting the Bear Queen Maka, who was a werebear who would she's gotten the crown, but kind of in a somewhat what would you call it?
Suspect.
Unjust or suspect way, perhaps. Yeah. But yeah, so then I think I wanted something that's like, right, well, you're going to go kill a lycanthrope, and you're going to get it from this very powerful Fae. So I think it kind of makes sense that maybe the spear was once used to kill lycanthropes. I thought, okay, what if maybe ancient elves who lived in the Feywild hunted lycanthropes? And I kind of built it into the lore so that, elves hunt lycanthropes. You can use spears for hunting. It's been done for thousands of years. So it's a spear that is like, but it's not even just that. It's like, this is the spear that is wielded by the head of the hunt, Others are holding silver spears, and that's fine. This is like the person who is leading the charge, who is leading the hunt, is wielding this spear. That's why one of the most recent abilities that when it leveled up is that you can command your allies with the spear and stuff like that, and kind of give them a certain buffs. And that's because you're meant to be at the head of the charge. You're at the head of the pack while you're hunting. You're meant to be able to inspire and buff out your allies when you do engage lycanthropes, and it's specifically designed to kill lycanthropes and bad Fae. So yeah, I kind of built that in very much like that. I don't really know. Sometimes I just make magic items for the absolute like crack. Like you have a sapphire beetle miniature that you guys can throw down, and it becomes a size huge Hercules beetle.
I love that.
that can break down the castle walls and stuff. It's like an armored helicopter because it can fly as well with you guys on its back. But I mean, like I didn't have any sort of inspiration for that. No, actually, that's not true. My inspiration for that was Appa from Avatar.
Yes. Oh.
I just thought, what if you had a flying tank, like a flying melee tank, like Appa? And then I thought it'd be cool to do like a Hercules Beetle. Yeah, I saw something about a Hercules. I think I saw videos of someone. They're the size of like your hand.
Oh yeah, they're really strong for their size as well. They're like absurdly strong for their size.
Yeah. And I saw one guy had one in his hand, and he's kind of lifted it up. And the beetles, when they get high, they automatically go, oh, this is a good jumping off point to get some good vantage, whatever. And they kind of pop out their wings, and then when they flutter, it sounds more like a bird flying than it does an insect. Like it sounds like a
helicopter.
Yeah, oh yeah, and they just kind of like glide, and they can kind of hover as well because of the way their wings are designed. They kind of hover. Yeah, sometimes I make magic items just for the absolute crack of it, like because like again, I just thought that would be cool. Same with Dan's. Dan is a bracer made out
the Acromancer
of
bracer.
The Acromancer's bracer. It's made out of whale bone. And inlaid with sapphires. It has these Aquan runes that are inlaid with sapphire. I think I did the whalebone thing because I might have been playing some Dishonored at the time, and you collect whalebones for the charms.
Yeah.
But I made it out of whalebone, and it just lets them cast a couple of water related things. I don't know that I have necessarily any real world inspiration for that.
Oh, I didn't.
Not really.
Yeah. No, I just I only thought of it because like I know. Like if I'm looking for like flavor, theme inspirations or ability inspirations, even like a lot of the time I'll go to like your video games, or like comic books are really great as well because every character usually has a gimmick. Like Mjolnir, Mjolnir's a hell of a magic item. Like
just add a bit of lightning damage to a dwarven thrower and you're set. Like,
isn't there? It's the Hammer of Thunderbolts, the Belt of Giant Slaying, and the.
Does the Hammer of Thunderbolts also return to you?
It's one of those ones. It's like it's the Hammer of Thunderbolts. You wear the belt of giant, the belt of. Yeah,
Storm Giant Strength. I want to say Storm Giant.
It's like a 3-item combo, and it basically turns the Hammer of Thunderbolts into Mjolnir, and it auto kills giants if they fail a con save.
That's right. Yeah, it's like 3 very rare items, but if you wear all 3 and they all require attunement, so it's the only 3 you can wear. But you would be absolutely and utterly unstoppable against giants.
Well, it's Thor's hammer, Thor's belt, and another thing. It's the Mjolnir, Meginjord, and something else I can't remember.
Yeah.
But like I'll always look. I usually.
Wish there's more of that actually.
What the combo items?
Yeah,
they did that with magical tattoos, and I'm a big fan of that. And you can have multiple magical tattoos, and they only take up the same one attunement slot.
But they don't inform one another, do they? Like
No.
You can't wield multiple tattoos and they buff each other out. Where in the same way that you can wield those 3 magic items, and as a result, each magic item gets a buff as well.
Yeah, no, I think there might be another one as well that's escaping me, but that's the one I remember most. Is the one that like, you have these 2 magic items and it turns you into Thor. Yeah, I love it though. But like comic books, I love looking at. For name inspiration, I actually look at the League of Legends names a lot. They have some really cool, because the League, you buy specific items to buff your character. Like you have an inventory of items that you buy over the game as you earn gold, and you will combine those items to better versions of items. So by the end of the game, you have 6 specific items that are on a full build, and they have some really cool names. Like there's one that's this like. It's this like giant mace that gives you, like, you don't actually have the item on your character when you're using it. It's like an inventory thing, but like it gives you like a bunch of damage, and you can activate it, and you will damage everyone around you in a certain area, and you will heal based on that damage you do, and it's called Gore Drinker.
Oh yeah, that's really good.
And then there's a similar one as well, where instead of healing you, what it does is it lets you dash forward a little bit, and if you you'll hit someone, and that damage will slow them and stop them from running away, and that one's called Stride Breaker. Like they have some really like the best the most damaging item you can get is a sword called Infinity Edge.
That's pretty cool.
And then there's another similarly tiered one called Storm Razor. That's like a katana its image is like a katana coming out of a sheath wreathed in lightning. So like I love looking at stuff like that to just kind of get the creative juices flowing, so I can be like, oh, that. And so like Eclipse Edge was something that came up when I was looking through various different items, and I was like, oh yeah, kind of following along the theme and stuff like that. What's annoying is I've other ones that have cool descriptions and names that I can't talk about
because they haven't come out in your campaign.
I'm looking at. I have my homebrew items pulled up on my other screen here, and I'm just like, I'd love to talk about this one, but that isn't in the game yet.
Well, we can definitely revisit magic items at another point, or maybe in one of our world building homebrew D&D ideas.
Hell yeah!
But yeah, that's you have me racking my brain now trying to think of items that have basically pulled 1-to-1 things. I mean, like I definitely get inspired by a lot of, maybe, like, I don't know, I could be wrong on this. No, I don't think so. Maybe I'm just drawing a weird parallel. I'm playing a lot of. I started playing Rainbow Six Siege again, and there's a character in that called Montaigne who just has this big shield, and it's impregnable. You cannot hit him if he's facing you with the shield. And I'm kind of drawing a parallel between that and the shield, the +3 shield I gave you. In campaign 1, but. I basically made it a tower shield to kind of be like, to make sense as to why it does +5 to your AC. But I think I'm actually drawing a parallel just because I was doing that recently and I thought of that magic item. I don't think they actually inspired one another.
I can actually give direct references from one of mine for Eclipse Edge because it was a moon thing. There's a weapon in Dark Souls it's in every Souls game. It's called the Holy Moonlight Greatsword. And some of its abilities kind of inspired some of the things I did for Eclipse Edge. And I had another one as well. There was another moon sword that kind of inspired it. I can't think of it right now. Shit. Gone. But it was like 2 specific moon swords from 2 different properties that I was like, I'm looking to do a moon sword anyway, so I like a bit of what this does and a bit of what this does, kind of pulled from that and then I kind of made it my own as that. And that's an awful lot of my kind of creative process for magic items, is like I will draw on things I know exist already in other properties or like stories or mythology and just kind of try in.
I mean, you can even just do that with the standard stuff that's in the DMG as well. I often find that if I put in something that's a base DMG magic item, I will reflavor it to fit the setting that it's in. So, for example, I gave you the armor we talked about a while ago. It was actually demon armor.
Yes,
the cursed demon armor.
Yes, it was.
But so that obviously looks a certain way in the art in the book. But you guys were in an Earth Elf city, and these Earth Elves worship, or some of them at least, some of the occult ones worship this bat demon god. and as a result, there is some of them are cursed to look like bats. But even then, the ones who weren't and still worship this god made items that resemble bats. That they have these points, these kind of things that come off and look like bat ears on the helmets, and they have claws and stuff like that are meant to resemble like all that kind of stuff from bats. So I basically reskinned that to look and feel as though it was like crafted by these elves who worship this bat god or bat demon god. But even then, it's literally, it was a 1-to-1 pull from the book and just gave you demon armor, you know. So I think like I think I do that probably an awful lot. I think I just reskin things.
Reskinning is fun.
Yeah, and it makes things. I think it makes things a bit more interesting or a bit more grounded in the world, rather than being like, here is like, again, I know I'm giving the Flame Tongue an awful rip in this podcast, but rather than going, here's yet another Flame Tongue, give it a different name, call it I don't know, the Pyre Saber. And then give it blue flames.
Pyro Saber.
Pyro Saber. There you go. Sounds like something out of Power Rangers.
Yeah, actually, it totally does.
But yeah, and then give it blue flames instead of or black flames, something like that. Something really weird. But then it's not the same item. Yeah, but then that can be something that's still very grounded in the world, and it doesn't, for your experienced players, you know exactly what a Flame Tongue sword is. It doesn't have to be the most repetitive thing. I apologize to all the Flame Tongue users out there.
Steve's gonna be heartbroken about his Flame Tongue dagger.
What do you have you're quite far into your campaign now. You're like you're 10, 11 levels in.
Yeah, I said it to Mike last night when we finished the session, when we were walking to the shop afterwards. I was like, they've scratched, they're not like scratched the surface level, they're past that a little. They've gone they're a little bit into like the end game plot now. They're kind of starting to get close to, and like I said, like, yeah, around the corner I've actually a fairly significant lore dump coming that I'm really excited to get to.
That's pretty cool. I was just curious because I think it was about this time in my first campaign that I started to experience power creep, or magic item power creep, and I'm just curious if you started to notice that, or have you managed to stem that within your campaign?
I feel like I've mostly managed to stem it now. I did not manage it at all in any fashion or way that was appropriate early on in my campaign.
Right. Okay.
And it wasn't until I actually sat down and was like, no, right, we're doing the Xanthar's rules. This is going to be this way. And then when I kind of started thinking a lot more about the impact my magic items would have, particularly because they were just walking through my encounters, and like, it's not that you want to kill them with every encounter, but like, if you don't at least challenge them, you're not giving them the opportunity to use their full suite of abilities. And that's where I think the most fun in D&D comes from, is being creative with the tools you have to solve the puzzle ahead of you. And like, I look at combat like that. Like, combat to me is a puzzle in D&D. It's like a puzzle that you solve in creative ways, and has the coolest
completely right.
And so, like, when it comes to magic items, you want them to help in that and give them ways to use them creatively, but you don't want to necessarily have a magic item that's going to be so powerful that, like, it's just going to walk through everything. Like, my guys just walk through hard encounters now, and I only throw hard encounters at my guys for the purpose of, I want them to be able to either have a bit of fun or walk through this, or this isn't the main event. Everything that I want to be a serious challenge them goes to deadly immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. I even go a bit beyond deadly at times.
Oh yeah. I wish they had like deadly +1, deadly +2.
Yeah. I had a big problem with that in my previous campaign. I was quite happy to give you guys a lot of really, really cool magic items.
Yeah.
It ended up just being that many of you were invulnerable to this, or you had insane speeds, or you would hit incredibly hard, or whatever. I found a problem in a way. I've corrected this now, in a way that I actually a problem I had early on, maybe up as far as level 5, 6, 7 in first campaign. I was still giving you guys magic items that corrected holes in your character.
Yeah.
For example, I gave Mike a ring that allowed him to buff out his AC based on his spellcasting modifier when he was a sorcerer. Looking back on that, fact that he has a low AC should have been a challenge point for Mike, where he tries to not get too involved or too up close in the fight, because he has, low enough AC.
Yeah.
And if he wants to take whatever spells, shield and whatever else to offset that, that's fine. But I gave him a ring that buffed out his AC, and I can't speak. I was trying to repair holds in a character that did not need to be repaired.
Yeah.
You should have gaps in what your character is capable of. Lug is really, really powerful up close, and he can even do some
medium range, as I say, is the extent of where I can go.
Yeah, you can throw your spear and recall it and stuff like that, and you've also got some good support based stuff as well, where you can kind of heal people or move them and stuff like that. And that's fine. Lug is 100% not the ranged character in the party. But that's fine as well. You should have gaps in what you're able to do as well.
Yeah,
you also can't heal.
Yeah, I can't heal. I can divert damage. I can
you can block damage.
How did I forget the word block? Jesus.
No, a second ago I was thinking to myself that I was trying to come up with the word block, or what you can do damage wise. But yeah, Lug has his uses. The same thing with Wabu, who's the other barbarian in the party. Wabu is an absolute damage dealer. He whips out damage.
Wabu's the Terminator.
But he's the Terminator, yeah. But I mean, other than that, he can also take quite a few hits.
Yeah.
And then other than that, he doesn't really have a whole lot more utility. He can't heal. He can't block damage. He doesn't have a particularly broad skill set in terms of his proficiencies and stuff like that, so he can't resolve many issues that way, other than strength, or I think he's quite good at animal handling as well. But I mean, that's the thing. Range, magic, healing, these are things Wabu doesn't have. We also have a warlock in the party who is quite good at range, because most of his spells are that. He also has a couple up close ones, but not a lot of health, not a lot of AC. No heal, very, very little.
Healing word, I believe, is the only spell that Arkham has.
He has a once a day use of that, yeah. And as a result, then that kind of puts him in a position where he can definitely dish out damage, and he has a lot of utility spells, Lowe's utility spells, which are really helpful.
Yeah.
But then other than that, he can't heal on a large scale, and he's really better off fighting. He also can't tank at all.
God, no.
There are gaps in characters that I feel like magic and. Anyone listening, definitely take this away with you. But don't feel like magic items should correct gaps in a character. They should probably buff out the existing strengths of that character.
Yes.
But don't try to if you're finding that your fighter is good at dealing damage and taking hits and all this, but can't heal, don't try to make them the healer.
Yeah.
Don't try to make your sorcerer, who is quite, or your wizard even, who is quite squishy. With low AC and low hit points, don't try to buff them out so that they have high AC and high hit points. They already do an absolute ton of damage with the high level spells they do. You don't need to try and also make them tanky. The idea is that they're a glass cannon, So yeah, that's a piece of advice I would definitely give about what kind of magic items to give your players. Try to buff out what they already do. You have a gunslinger in your class, give him a good magic gun.
He actually hasn't gotten a magic gun yet.
Oh no.
he's been quite clever about it, actually, and he's avoided the worst part of the labor and expense that would be magic items by just making magic bullets.
If it works, it works.
Yeah, it's actually been a really clever way to go about it. You could do the same with an archer, where instead of making a magic bow, you could just make a variety of magical ammunition.
Yeah. And you could go all Green Arrow / Hawkeye, where you have a bunch of different arrows that do different things. Yeah. Ooh. But Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have today.
Ooh, it's been a good one today.
I feel that we had a good conversation there about magic items.
I could talk for another hour, I feel.
Same, yeah. There's a handful of notes here I didn't even get to go through, so that's really good. But yeah, that is our podcast on magic items for now, at least. We'll probably revisit this at another point. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, stories you'd like to share, or topics you would like us to cover, please tweet us at Micflayers Pod. It's on the screen at the moment. You can also find our pod. You can find our podcast on YouTube and Spotify.
Indeed.
Every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
Mostly found here on the Micflayers podcast, but you can also find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which is boom right down there in the right hand corner. Also on the Micflayers podcast Twitter account, which is also in the furthest right hand corner, just under Connor there. And yeah, that's most of it. I occasionally streaming on Twitch, but very occasionally. I usually stream once, then don't stream for like 2 weeks, then stream again. But yeah, you can mostly find me here where all the good stuff is, talking about D&D every week like a big old nerd.
Brilliant. You can find me on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, 1 N, very important. And as always, to say it again, every Friday here on the Micflayers podcast at 6 p.m. Irish time. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation myself and Martin had about magic items. We'll be back next week with more D&D goodness. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.